Thank you, Madam President. I would also like to join colleagues in thanking Assistant Secretary General Khalid Khiari for his detailed briefing. The humanitarian catastrophe in Gaza defies comprehension. The latest report of the Secretary General on the implementation of Resolution 2334 describes the levels of suffering and brutality in Gaza as shocking and unbearable. In the words of the Secretary General, families have been displaced again and again and are now confined to less than 1/5 of Gaza's land. And even these shrinking spaces are under threat. Children are dying of malnutrition despite repeated warnings from UNICEF that malnourishment is rising at an alarming rate. In May alone, over 5,100 children between 6 months and 5 years of age were admitted for treatment for acute malnutrition. Since the collapse of the temporary ceasefire in March, more than 6,500 additional lives have been lost. The Secretary General's report also raises grave concerns about Israel's means and methods of warfare and reiterates the urgent need for accountability for atrocity crimes and other violations of international law. It further highlights the alarming number of Palestinians, including children, detained by Israeli forces and the continued surge in administrative detentions. These are very disturbing developments. Madam President, the so-called new aid distribution mechanism is not only contrary to international humanitarian law and human dignity, it places starving civilians in direct danger, forcing them to cross active combat zones in search of food and water. The result is a grotesque cycle of horror. Over 500 people have been killed while trying to access humanitarian aid. This is a death trap, as rightly described by the Secretary General. There is no need to reinvent the wheel with militarized, dangerous, and unlawful schemes. The UN already has a proven humanitarian delivery system grounded in humanity, neutrality, impartiality, and independence. What is needed is unhindered access and the political will to let the UN do its job. Madam President, the violence is not confined to Gaza. In the occupied West Bank, including East Jerusalem, Israel has intensified its military raids, expanded illegal settlements, and enabled unchecked settler violence. According to OCHA, between 7th October 2023 and 19th June 2025, 949 Palestinians, including at least 200 children, have been killed in the West Bank and over 40,000 forcibly displaced, the largest displacement since 1967. These actions constitute a blatant violation of international law and of Council's Resolution 2334, which unequivocally reaffirmed the illegality of Israeli settlements and demanded an immediate end to their expansion. 9 years since the adoption of Resolution 2334, we have not seen its implementation. Instead, we have witnessed regression and an emboldening of unlawful practices that obstruct the prospects for peace and the two-state solution. The failure to enforce the Council's own decisions carries grave consequences for global peace and security and undermines the Council's own authority and credibility. Madam President, the question of Palestine remains the core of the Arab-Israeli conflict. To resolve it justly and durably, the Security Council must act with urgency and clarity. Pakistan reiterates the following essential steps. First, Israel must immediately cease its military operations in Gaza and the West Bank. A permanent ceasefire must be established without further delay. and we support the ongoing efforts in that regard. Second, the blockade on humanitarian aid must be lifted fully and unconditionally. The UN and humanitarian organizations must be granted safe and unimpeded access. Third, we call for international support to the Arab League OIC plan for recovery and reconstruction in Gaza. This plan is essential not only for rebuilding Gaza but also for restoring hope and laying the foundation for lasting peace. Fourth, we call for practical and time-bound measures to ensure the implementation of Resolution 2334, which is essential to preserving the viability of the two-state solution and preventing irreversible facts on ground. Fifth, we reiterate the need for a credible and irreversible political process to realize the two-state solution based on the pre-June 1967 borders with Al-Quds al-Sharif as the capital of the state of Palestine. We support the earliest resumption of the high-level international conference to advance that goal. Madam President, this year marks the 80th anniversary of the UN Charter, a charter that enshrines the principles of justice, peace, and the sovereign equality of all peoples. Yet, in Gaza and across the occupied Palestinian territory, we see the most fundamental tenets of that charter continue to be trampled upon with impunity. The Council must not remain a bystander. It is imperative to address and tackle the root cause, to bring an end to the illegal Israeli occupation of the Arab territories. It is disingenuous to put the blame elsewhere. It is time for credible action to reaffirm our shared commitment to a just and lasting peace in the Middle East. I thank you.